What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Right or Wrong NFL podcast. I am your host, Anthony Ryder, and we finally have some real football to talk about. Last week was the first week of the NFL preseason where we got a first look at all 32 NFL teams. Every single team played a preseason game. Every single team had some things on display, and for the first time since February, we get to talk some football. This week was a very encouraging one for a lot of teams with a ton of big games, a lot of big moments, and so many standout rookies and standout players that there is so much to talk about. So, getting right into it, we are going to start off with the scores from around the league. Now, the NFL preseason kicked off on Thursday afternoon as the New York Giants went into Foxborough and beat the New England Patriots 23-21 to open this week of football. Later that day, the Baltimore Ravens went on to win their 21st consecutive preseason game against the Tennessee Titans. Kind of a meaningless record, but also kind of a very interesting and very cool record that the Ravens have now won 21 straight preseason games in the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons opened up Friday's NFL action by having a fourth quarter comeback versus the Detroit Lions, defeating them by a score of 27-23. The Cleveland Browns beat the Jacksonville Jaguars by a score of 24-13. The New York Jets upset the Philadelphia Eagles despite the injury to Zach Wilson. We'll get into that in just a little bit, but the Jets did upset the Eagles by a score of 24-21. The Cardinals bested the Cincinnati Bengals with the top scoring offense of the week, putting up 36 points, winning that game by a score of 36-23. The Trey Lance era got underway in San Francisco and got off to a hot start as the 49ers beat the Green Bay Packers in the first week of preseason 28-21. Carolina kind of fell backwards into a win versus the Washington Commanders by a score of 23-21. Chicago upset Kansas City 19-14. The Bills take down the Indianapolis Colts 27-24 despite having 5 team turnovers and throwing 3 interceptions on the day. Kenny Pickett, the only first-round quarterback from this year's previous class, led his first game-winning drive in his first game of NFL action as he ended up helping the Pittsburgh Steelers defeat the Seattle Seahawks by a score of 32-25. Miami beat Tampa Bay in the in-state battle 26-24. Houston won a very close game versus the New Orleans Saints by a score of 17-13. Denver dominated the Dallas Cowboys 17-7. The Rams beat the Chargers by 7 in Los Angeles, and the Raiders ended up closing out week 1 with their second preseason win over the Minnesota Vikings with a very close contest of 26-20. This was an extremely fun week of preseason games, a lot of really close games. Only 2 or 3 games really got out of hand, and only a few games were actually decided by less or by more than a single touchdown. The New England Patriots game, the New England Patriots versus the Giants, was a very good one. Baltimore and Tennessee, although the scoreboard might not be the closest game you see all week, it was a very entertaining game because of just some of the rookies that were playing. The Atlanta Falcons Detroit Lions game was extremely close and a very fun game to watch. Speaking from somebody that was physically at that game, I was able to go to Ford Field to actually watch that game and see that game in person. That was a very close, very exciting game. The Zach Wilson injury in the Jets game was kind of a big deal this week, but the Jets were able to rally around and they were able to win their first preseason game. The Cardinals offense looked very good. The Trey Lance era began. There was a ton of storylines and a ton of takeaways from this week's NFL action. And with the scores being out of the way, I want to get on to the winners of preseason week 1. And this isn't necessarily, the people that actually won on the scoreboard. This isn't necessarily the teams that, put up the most points or the teams that even won their respective football games. Because as we all know, it is the preseason, and at the end of the day, the scoreboard is really the least important thing that we're going to talk about, right? The more important things come from how did your players look? How did the starters look? How is your depth competing? Which players are stepping up from your rookie class and kind of showing the potential that they have? And with that being the case, I came away with 3 big winners and a few bigger losers from this week, and I wanted to kind of mention and preface those players and those teams in particular. Now, the first winner, and these, by the way, are in no in particular order. The first winner from week 1 of the preseason, I think, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh, of course, did actually win their game versus the Seattle Seahawks in a very close, very back and forth battle between the two very iconic franchises. Pittsburgh ended up coming out on top by a score of 32-25, and Kenny Pickett actually came in and drove his team down on his first game-winning drive of his NFL career. Now, was it the cleanest win by Kenny Pickett? No. Was it the, great storyline of, okay, there's a minute left, you drive 95 yards and score this game-winning touchdown on the last play of the game? No, it wasn't the cleanest win. It wasn't the cleanest comeback victory. In fact, it actually took a turnover by the defense to set Pittsburgh up in opponent territory for this comeback to officially happen. But it happened. Kenny Pickett, in his first game, in his first NFL action, his first real opportunity in the NFL, he drove a game-winning drive to score with 3 seconds left and put his team on top. And at the end of the day, that is a really, really impressive thing to do from a rookie quarterback. Now, Mitch Trubisky did start this game as the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback 1. Mitch Trubisky looked pretty good, went 4 for 7, 63 yards, and 1 touchdown. And the offense under Mitchell Trubisky actually played really well. They jumped out to a 14-point lead after the first quarter, and they looked like a very good, dominant football team. Now, granted, the Seattle Seahawks, at least on paper, aren't expected to be one of the higher quality defenses in the NFL anymore, and they certainly aren't really going to be, the top of the NFL anymore, right? The Legion of Boom era is over. The Russell Wilson era is over. The Seattle Seahawks are not the team that they used to be, but with all these questions coming in about how well will the offense run, who's going to start as the starting quarterback on the offense, how are they going to look, how are they going to drive, are they going to be able to score points? They did. The Pittsburgh Steelers scored 14 points with the first team offense. They went 2 drives, 2 touchdowns. The offense looked good. They moved really well. Mitch Trubisky looked calm, looked really good in the pocket, made some good throws down the field, and obviously, as I said, led his team for the time that he was on the field to play winning football. But I think the real reason for them being the winners of preseason week 1, or at least being one of the winners of this first week of the preseason, isn't necessarily because of the scoreboard, but first off, like I just mentioned, the offense looked very good. The offense being the big, real concern from this offseason, right? We know the defense is going to be good. We know that Pittsburgh still has TJ, they have Minkah, they have just some really good defensive superstars from this year, from the NFL, right? They have some big stars. They have some players that are going to be all pros, pro bowlers. They're going to be top 100 players in the NFL when the list comes out. Their defense is going to be fine. The real question came from their offense, right? How is Mitch Trubisky going to take over for Big Ben, right? How is this offense going to function? Can it be better than an offense last year that at some points held the Pittsburgh Steelers back from winning football games? And I think that, this week showed that, obviously the game planning aspect wasn't there. Obviously, it's week 1 and there's some rust to knock off for the defenses. But I think that this week showed more than anything that Pittsburgh can score some points with Mitch Trubisky. I think it showed that regardless of who is starting at the quarterback position, the Steelers are going to have a serviceable offense. They are going to be able to put up points. They are going to be able to score, and they are going to be able to keep themselves in some games. And will they be, some juggernaut offensively? Are they going to be the next Kansas City? Are they going to be the next Buffalo? Are they going to put up 40 to 50 points a game? No, they're not going to be some elite offense, and I would genuinely be surprised if they were a top 5 offense in the NFL. But I think the only thing Pittsburgh's really looking for at this point is being competitive, right? I think their whole thing is if we can have even a league average offense, if we can score right around league average, our defense is top of the line. Our defense is elite and it's great. And if we can just be average on offense, we can win a lot of football games this season. Now, another big reason I think that Pittsburgh was a big winner this week was because of their rookie class. As I said, Kenny Pickett came in, was really the third string quarterback for this week, but did get quite a bit of playing time. He came in and completed 13 of his 15 passing attempts, going for 95 passing yards and 2 touchdowns, including, as we mentioned earlier, leading the game-winning 2-minute drill, where he threw the game-winning touchdown with 3 seconds remaining on the clock. Kenny Pickett looked calm, he looked composed, he looked ready to step up in a big moment, and I understand that, yes, it's versus second stringers, it's versus third stringers, but Kenny Pickett was playing with the third string offensive line. All right, Kenny Pickett was playing with second, third string wide receivers. He wasn't really playing, with Deontay Johnson. He wasn't really playing with George Pickens. He wasn't, playing with the starting offensive line or the starting tight end or the starting weapons in general. But Kenny Pickett made it work. Kenny Pickett went out there, right? First opportunity for that game-winning drive that didn't really go so well. He scrambled out of the pocket, kind of looked a little bit flustered, and did take a sack that ended up losing possession for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But just one play later, his defense does their job. They get the ball back for Kenny Pickett in Seattle territory, and Kenny Pickett comes back out, right? Kind of has this pressure of, okay, you were the first quarterback taken in the draft. You were the only first-round quarterback taken in last year's draft. You are being talked about as the successor to a first-ballot Hall of Fame quarterback who quarterbacked this team for a decade plus. And now you have to come out and show that you were worth that first round pick. I think with all this pressure riding on him, yes, it's the preseason. The actual outcome of the game doesn't impact the Steelers, but this game had stakes for Kenny Pickett, right? This game was, can you be that quarterback? Can you be that guy in Pittsburgh that leads us to wins? Can you climb this depth chart to quarterback 2 or maybe even quarterback 1? How are you under pressure? How are you going to perform when you need to score a touchdown and when you need your best plays to come? And Kenny Pickett stepped right up to the plate. He threw a really good touchdown pass. He scrambled and got a few first downs with his legs. He looked calm. He looked composed. He was very accurate, made the right read, wasn't forcing it into the end zone, wasn't forcing any big plays to happen, wasn't, forcing it into the end zone because there was limited time left. He just kind of worked within the system, worked within the play calls, made the most of each individual play call at a time. And at the end of the day, he gave his wide receiver an extremely catchable football, let his wide receiver turn back inside, stay in bounds, and go score the game-winning touchdown. Now, Kenny Pickett was not the only rookie from Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, Kenny Pickett was not the only rookie from the Pittsburgh Steelers to have a good day. George Pickens, the second-round pick and the second selection by Pittsburgh, also had a very, very productive day and got quite a bit of hype surrounding him. George Pickens had 3 receptions on 4 targets for 43 yards and a touchdown, averaging 14.3 yards per reception. Now, George Pickens has been a standout at Pittsburgh Steelers camp over the past month or so, and he absolutely showed why in the first preseason game. He showed a lot of really good things in his first NFL action. He showed that he has some real legit strength to push around NFL DBs. He showed really good hands. He showed really good body control. He showed that toe tap ability and that sideline awareness to know where the out of bounds and where the inbounds is. And I mean, his touchdown catch was a really, really well thrown over the shoulder ball that he got in the very, very back corner of the Pittsburgh Steelers end zone, right? He kind of showed strength in blocking. He had a really nice block where he put the DB on the ground, right? He just showed very veteran-esque wide receiver things in his first game, right? Yes, he is a rookie. Yes, there's still things that he's going to need to learn. There's things that he's going to need to, do to contribute larger to the team, right? Because, 3 receptions for 43 yards isn't necessarily the most explosive day, but it was a lot more of the nuanced things. It was more the hand usage. It was more the footwork. It was more the, body control and the toe tap ability and that awareness on the sidelines that really impressed a lot of people from George Pickens' first outings. And it doesn't hurt that he blocks people like a truck. Now, moving on to the second winners of the first week of preseason, I thought the San Francisco 49ers had a really, really good week, right? All offseason, and really since Trey Lance has been drafted, we've been talking about what is the Trey Lance era going to look like? What is this era of 49ers football going to look like? Are they going to move from a run-heavy team to a pass-heavy team? Are they going to lean in to the strengths of Trey Lance? Are they going to develop him properly? Is he going to develop properly, being the former 3rd overall pick? And we kind of got some answers in the first week of the preseason, right? The former 3rd overall pick from the 2021 NFL Draft went out and he completed 4 of his 5 pass attempts, throwing for 92 yards and 1 touchdown across 2 drives to start the season. He looked very sharp, had good ball placement, had a really, really nice throw down the boundary on kind of a deep go ball to his wide receiver. And he did all this, right? Went 4 for 5, 92 yards and a touchdown, nearly a perfect day passing without Brandon Ayuk, without Deebo Samuel, without George Kittle, without a lot of the starting offensive linemen, right? He made it work with these backup wide receivers. Right? He was throwing to Ray McCloud. He was throwing to, a bunch of backup wide receivers that have bounced around the NFL or are rookies or are undrafted free agents or, whatever the case may be. If you were to look at the starting lineup for the 49ers a few days ago, you probably couldn't have named too many of the weapons Trey Lance was throwing to, and yet he went 4 for 5 for 92 yards and a touchdown. Now, it is worth mentioning that the Green Bay Packers weren't playing their whole defense, right? He wasn't throwing at Jair Alexander. He wasn't facing Rashad Gary or, Preston Smith when it came to pass rush, right? It wasn't against the Packers' number 1 defense, but in a preseason game where it's all about showing your talent, it's all about showing your accuracy, right? It's more about individual performances in the preseason than the overall team game. I thought Trey Lance looked sharp. He looked really good. He kind of used his legs to scramble a little bit. He didn't do a whole lot outside the pocket, but when he did, it looked pretty good and very natural. And like I said, had the one really, really borderline perfect throw right over the DB's head, and his wide receiver was able to catch it in stride and take it for a touchdown. And he did these things without Brandon Ayuk and without Deebo and without George Kittle, without the great offensive line that they have. So, I think that just based purely off of a talent standpoint, purely based off of his athletic ability, his ability to just go out and play some football, I thought that the Trey Lance era started very, very well in the Bay. Now the 49ers defense did force quite a few turnovers as well, and I wanted to shout out the 2 players that came away with interceptions. Marcelino McCray-Ball, the undrafted rookie free agent, came away with a big-time interception for the Niners defense. And then Samuel Womack, the 5th-round pick from the University of Toledo, the 5th-round defensive back, actually came away with 2 interceptions off of Jordan Love. Right? The Packers offense didn't really look too good under Jordan Love. It kind of is starting to get into that territory of how bad did the Green Bay Packers mess up with this pick of Jordan Love? But as I said, the Niners had 2 rookie defensive backs, both come away with at least 1 interception, and their 5th-round pick did come away with 2. I do think the Niners do have some, I wouldn't say holes in the defensive backs, but they did lose a few defensive backs to injury and a few defensive backs to free agency last year. So I think adding some quality depth like Samuel Womack and Marcelino McCray-Ball are, I think it's good that their rookies are starting to show some flashes. And I do think it's very good that, they are kind of starting to show this ability to turn the football over. Now, the rest of their rookie class didn't play bad, but there weren't really a whole lot of other standouts, right? Drake Jackson, the pass rusher, the edge rusher from USC, did end up leaving the game with a minor injury and did not return for the rest of the day. And, the rest of their rookie class just didn't have any huge standout days. But I did want to mention those 2 rookie defensive backs because I think that, they are kind of showing that they belong in the NFL, and they're definitely making a case to make the active roster for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, I think that, again, kind of just moving back to Trey Lance, I think that Trey Lance can live up to the hype. And this is really, the big reason why I think San Francisco and this was a big reason. Trey Lance was the major reason as to why I think the 49ers were one of the bigger winners of week 1. Trey Lance, that era kind of got underway. He looked really sharp. And if Trey Lance can play as a top 15, top 12 quarterback, he doesn't even have to be top 10. right? Because Jimmy Garoppolo was never a top 10 quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is kind of in that same area with like a Jared Goff or a Baker Mayfield, where it's like he can win you football games, right? If you put him in the right situation, if you put him in, kind of a good play call and you put him around with some good weapons and you kind of have a good run game and some good defensive stars, you can win football games with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can go to a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. You can go to a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. But those players were never going to elevate the players around them, and they were never going to be the sole reason or the primary reason why your team was successful. But Trey Lance can be that guy. Trey Lance has all the athletic ability, has all the tools to go out and be a top 15 to 12 quarterback this year. And in the future, he can be a top 10, a top 5 quarterback. He is that talented and he is that special when it comes to his physical gifts and his ability. But Trey Lance doesn't have to be a top 5 quarterback for the 49ers to be good. The 49ers in the past 5 years have been to a Super Bowl, have been to multiple playoff appearances, and just last year played in the NFC Conference Championship with the conservative play of Jimmy Garoppolo. So if Trey Lance can be a top 15 quarterback, if he can be a top 12 quarterback, be a little bit better, make a few more big-time plays in big moments than Jimmy Garoppolo, the 49ers are going to be right back in that playoff contention. They're going to be right back in that Super Bowl contention. And all Trey Lance has to do is play decent. All Trey Lance has to do is kind of start his career in San Francisco without turning the football over, just playing good, methodical football. And he doesn't have to, necessarily carry the 49ers to wins because they are a good enough team to win with mediocre quarterback play, right? Their running game is always going to be good no matter who's running the football. Their defense has been good for multiple years at this point. All that they need is the quarterback to take them over the top. And if Trey Lance can be that top 12 quarterback, I think we're talking about San Francisco in a few months, about potential Super Bowl and maybe even first seed competitors in the NFC race. Now, the Detroit Lions are another team that I think won this week of the preseason, and they didn't physically win their matchup versus the Atlanta Falcons. They were actually the one team in this winners column that didn't win in week 1, right? They did lose. They kind of did give up that fourth quarter comeback to the Atlanta Falcons, and they did give up a fourth quarter comeback to Desmond Ridder and, that offense. But despite the fact that they lost the game on the scoreboard, for a large majority of the game, they were the better football team. For a large majority of the game, they were leading in that game. And with all the questions for the Detroit Lions going into that football game, I think a lot more questions got answered than concerns got raised, right? The Lions went into week 1 with a brand new wide receiver 1 and really a new wide receiving core with players coming back and, Jared Goff and the quarterback having to develop chemistry with these guys. That was going to be a big question. They have a new offensive coordinator in Ben Johnson who called his first play calls of his NFL career as an offensive coordinator. You had multiple new starters on the defensive line and the defense as a whole, including Aiden Hutchinson coming in. You had, the linebacker play that you didn't know who was going to start at linebacker. You didn't know who was going to start at cornerback for the Detroit Lions. There were so many questions going into that game, and yet I think that the Lions answered almost all of them, and they did it in a very impressive way. Offensively, the Lions offense looked very good to open the game. Again, I was at this game, so I think, admittedly, there may be a little bit of bias here, but I did get to see some of that behind the scenes stuff. I did get to see the sidelines and the reactions, and I did get to see, how they were acting and kind of the body language of this team when they were on the field and off the field. And the offense was very good under Ben Johnson, right? It was his first time really calling plays as the offensive coordinator, and the starting offense was, I would say, dominant, right? The offensive line opened up so many big lanes. They opened up so many running lanes for the running back. DeAndre Swift, their starter, averaged 5 yards per carry. Their second string guy in Jamal Williams averaged 6 yards a carry. And their third string running back, Craig Reynolds, averaged 5+ yards a carry as well, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe averaged just under 5 yards per carry. But their starting three, their big three running backs all averaged well over 4 yards a carry on the day. And the offensive line was as advertised. The offensive line was dominant. They opened up massive run game. They opened up massive running lanes. They kept Jared Goff extremely clean in the pocket. I don't even think Jared Goff got touched. He didn't even get breathed on in the Lions preseason game because the Lions offensive line is that good. The starting offense drove down the field effortlessly on the opening drive and scored without targeting either of their boundary wide receivers, right? We came into this game not knowing how DJ Chark was going to mesh with Jared Goff. But to be quite honest, it didn't really matter because DJ Chark didn't get targeted once. He didn't even get looked at on the opening drive because they ran the ball well. Jared Goff connected twice with Amon-Ra St. Brown and once with Brock Wright on this drive and went 3 for 4, drove his team down the field. And when it came to the red zone, the Lions ran the ball twice and scored a touchdown. They were very good. They had 0 negative plays. They went backward 0 times. They looked really, really good. And the only play I would say that was kind of a negative on that opening drive was a dropped pass by the second string running back in Jamal Williams in the flats that at its best would have been a 2 to 3 yard pickup anyways. So the offense came out. The offense looked really, really good. Right? The offensive line was maybe looking like the best offensive line in all of football. And then, you have to consider the rookies. And the Lions had quite a few rookies play big snaps and play a lot of time in this game. And despite the fact that second-round pick Josh Pascal didn't play, despite the fact that first-round pick Jameson Williams didn't play, nor did James Mitchell, the fifth-round pick from Virginia Tech, the Lions' defensive starters looked really good. The Lions defensive starters included, of course, Aiden Hutchinson, the second overall pick in this year's class. Aiden Hutchinson was double teamed on his first ever career play as a pass rusher, did get a tackle for loss on his second ever career play, and in the first drive of being an NFL player, Aiden Hutchinson was doubled, he was held, and he still got a tackle for loss and pressures and very nearly got a sack on Marcus Mariota as well. He is, as of right now, the highest graded defensive rookie from this year's class as of playing, I believe, more than 10 snaps on the defensive side of the ball. He was the highest graded rookie around the NFL this week from a defensive perspective. Now, Aiden Hutchinson was not the only rookie that played well. Kirby Joseph, I also thought, was a standout on the defensive side of the ball. The safety from Illinois, the third round, 97th overall pick in the 2022 class. He actually led the team in tackles with 6 total tackles on the day. And actually had some pretty good coverage snaps. Did give up a touchdown to the fullback, but was in very tight coverage, and it was just a very well-placed ball that Kirby Joseph could not reach. And then Malcolm Rodriguez also had a pretty good day at linebacker. Made more of an impact on special teams, but did start as a 6th-round rookie on the linebacking core for the Detroit Lions. Did make some splash plays, did disrupt the running game, and did disrupt the quarterback a few times. But just overall, I thought it was a very good game for the Detroit Lions. They felt like a better football team than they did last year, right? Last year, they were scrappy, but admittedly, they weren't very good, right? They didn't win a lot of games. This team, from top to bottom, from the offense to even some of the splash plays that the first-team defense made, to the depth players that they had, and the Lions by no means are healthy going into this game. They were missing a lot of players that they're going to rely on in this game, in this season, including Jameson Williams, Josh Pascal, James Mitchell, Jerry Jacobs, the Okwara brothers, Levi Onwuzurike, the second-round pick from a season ago, and more. And Quintez Cephas is another guy that's missing time. There are so many, 9 to 10 players that are going to not only make this roster, but impact this roster in the regular season that aren't healthy yet. And knowing that those guys are coming back, knowing that the Lions are pretty heavily depleted already going into the season from an injury perspective, the fact that they were the better team for a large majority of the game, for, knowing that the offensive coordinator is going to call some good plays, he is going to finally put some people in position to make plays unlike last year, I think it's a very encouraging game for the Detroit Lions. And despite the loss, I thought they were the better football team. 7th-round pick Chase Lucas, the cornerback from Arizona State, came out, and although we only played 7 snaps, had 1 big tackle and 1 very near pick 6, did break up the pass, and if he had caught it, would have been running into the end zone for the game-winning score and the game-sealing touchdown. But overall, the defense played pretty good, I would say, for a majority of the backups. A lot of the backups did impress me on the defensive side of the ball, right? The rookies, every single rookie that ended up playing made a major impact at some point in the game, right? Kirby Joseph led the team in tackles. Malcolm Rodriguez made a couple big hits and was very disruptive at linebacker. Aiden Hutchinson got his first tackle for loss. Chase Lucas, the 7th-round pick, very nearly took his first career snap for a pick 6 versus Desmond Ridder. And I do think the Lions are going to be a sneaky 7 to 8 win team this year. They do feel like a better football team. They do feel like a team that can compete. They do feel like a football team that can win a lot of football games. And Friday really confirmed that this team is different than last year. This team is not just scrappy, but they're playing good football, right? They're not just a team that's going to stick around. They're going to be a team that can win football games. They're going to be a team that can lead football games. And if the offense looks anywhere near as good as they looked on that first drive on Friday, the Lions are going to have a pretty explosive offense to go with it. Now, of course, not every single team can be the winner of their preseason matchups, right? Not every team had a great showing. Not every team came out and showed as much promise as the three teams we just talked about. And in fact, there were quite a few teams that came out and actually had some negative takeaways. There were a few teams that, stood above the rest in not the best way. And there were teams that kind of came out, and the takeaways from week 1 of the preseason were more negative than positive. And the first team that does apply to is a team that won their first preseason game, and actually a team that won their preseason game by double-digit points, and that would be the Cleveland Browns. Now, the Cleveland Browns by no means had a bad showing as a football team, as they did win their game. They did end up beating the Jacksonville Jaguars by a score of 24-13. But at the end of the day, there is one major takeaway from this game, and there's one glaring takeaway that cannot be ignored despite the double-digit win, despite the rookies playing well, despite the team being in a very good situation. There is one glaring downside that cannot be ignored, and that is the play of starting quarterback Deshaun Watson. Now, the big storyline from this offseason was the Cleveland Browns trading for the Houston superstar. And they gave up 3 first-round picks and even more draft capital on top of that, as well as guaranteeing Watson $230 million over a 5-year span to be the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. They thought that Baker Mayfield was not the answer. They felt like Baker Mayfield wasn't the guy for them, so they decided to move on. They decided to go to the next quarterback, the guy that is proven, the guy that has been to a Pro Bowl, the guy that has gotten MVP caliber buzz and gotten MVP votes in the past. And they gave up a majority of their future as well as a lot of their capital from the salary cap standpoint for Deshaun Watson. Now, I'm not going to get into Deshaun Watson's off the field issues because that is not for me to speak on. I don't have any inside information or anything like that, so I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk about his off the field issues. But what I will talk about are his on the field struggles. Deshaun Watson, after all the hype, after taking a year away from football, and after taking $230 million from the Cleveland Browns organization, Deshaun Watson went out and threw 5 passes in his debut, which is pretty normal for a starting quarterback. But in those 5 passes, Deshaun Watson completed a staggering one completion for 7 yards. And not only did he not even pick up a touchdown, he did not even pick up a first down on 3 consecutive drives as the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback. Yes, Deshaun Watson's debut left a lot to be desired, to say the least. Deshaun Watson kind of had a lot of hype going into this season, and don't get me wrong, Deshaun Watson is an extremely talented quarterback. The Deshaun Watson from Houston, has been one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, a top 10 quarterback that makes plays, has gotten MVP buzz, has put up elite Pro Bowl All-Pro numbers. But the Deshaun Watson we saw in Cleveland was not that guy. Deshaun Watson did not look very good. He didn't look very comfortable. He was inaccurate, right? He was rolling out of the pocket like we've seen him do in Houston numerous times and just didn't complete the pass. Now, granted, one of these passes was, I'd say, a catchable throw from Deshaun Watson that was dropped by his wide receiver, but 3 of the 5 passes were just simply off the mark. And for, I believe, all 5 of those passes, they all were fairly clean pockets. Deshaun Watson was not being hit. There was not a guy in his face. They were all throws that you would expect a $230 million quarterback to make, and they just didn't. Deshaun Watson looked off. He just didn't look like he was ready to play football in the NFL. And for a player that is a 5th-year veteran at this point, for a player that has been in the NFL, for a player that has been around the league and has won football games, did, go in and upset the Legion of Boom as a rookie. He did, go in and put up 5 touchdowns in his first start. He is a player that has been around the NFL, and he is a player that has put up good stats and has put up some good quality victories in his time in the NFL. for him to go out and go 1 for 5 for 7 yards against a Jacksonville Jaguars defense that I'd say is improved from last year, but is certainly not any elite unit on paper, it's very concerning if you are a Cleveland Browns fan, right? And with that being said, right, as I mentioned earlier, this game was not all negative for Cleveland. They did have, some good players played. Their offense, I think, all around is one that can function in the NFL. They have a very good offensive line. They have the best and deepest running back core in the NFL. They did not have a bad showing by any means, right? But the big concern and the big reason why they are the losers of week 1 is because Deshaun Watson didn't look like a starting quarterback. Deshaun Watson didn't look like somebody that could lead your team to a Super Bowl, despite how talented the Cleveland Browns roster actually is, right? And again, it wasn't a bad overall showing. Jerome Ford, the late round running back pickup, had 10 carries for 57 yards, averaging 5.7 yards per carry. The defense played without a lot of its star players, right? Denzel Ward, Myles Garrett didn't play, but they still played very well, holding Jacksonville to just 13 points on the day. And, overall, I think Cleveland's a very good football team. Cleveland, in my opinion, is a playoff caliber roster. They are a team that should have playoff aspirations from this year, as they were just a few plays removed from an AFC championship berth 2 years ago to this day. But, like I said, despite how talented the roster is, despite how good Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt and Dearness Johnson are, despite how good Amari Cooper may be at the wide receiver 1, despite how good the offensive line is, despite how disruptive Myles Garrett is as a pass rusher, the Cleveland Browns will not accomplish anything in the season if Deshaun Watson cannot play well. If their quarterback play is not up to par, they will not accomplish their goals in the 2022 NFL season. And yes, obviously Deshaun Watson is at a very minimum suspended for 6 games and likely at this point will be suspended for more games by the time the season actually rolls around. And Jacoby Brissett will be the likely starting quarterback. Hopefully there's no injuries or anything like that, but Jacoby Brissett will likely start as the quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. If Jacoby Brissett does not play well, and if Deshaun Watson comes back and plays even worse, I think Cleveland is going to be in a little bit of trouble, right? Obviously, the Deshaun Watson situation is a complicated one in Cleveland. Some people are still happy about the trade. A lot of people are very unhappy about the trade, but after the stat line he put up and after just the performance that Deshaun Watson put on the board in Jacksonville, I would not be super happy if I was a Cleveland Browns fan. I think that, they look very poor in their starting offense, especially looked very, very poor on the first couple of drives. And, I think more time off, more time under suspension is the last thing that Deshaun Watson needs as a starting quarterback right now. Now, with that being said, the New York Jets are another team that I thought were losers of the week 1, but not particularly because of bad play or bad overall performance, but because of the obvious circumstance that did plague their team, and that would be the injury suffered to Zach Wilson. Now, the New York Jets actually did end up upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles in this week of play. They did end up actually winning this game by a score of 24-21 with some really good play on the back end and by the backups. But the big reason why the New York Jets were losers, or I'd say why they didn't have the most positive takeaways from this week, were because of the injury suffered to Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, in the early first part of the game, did suffer a non-contact knee injury that, luckily for the New York Jets, is not an ACL tear. From what I have heard, it seems to be a bone bruise as well as something else very minor that is expected to keep Zach Wilson out anywhere from 1 to 2 months. From what I've seen, it's anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks that is going to keep out Zach Wilson from playing quarterback in the NFL. And for a Jets team that has gotten much better this offseason, for a Jets team that I think maybe not is competing for the playoffs, but is certainly in contention for a 7 seed at the most, and is competing for a better record, is trying to compete in a tough AFC East division, is trying to contend with the Patriots and the Bills and the Dolphins, the Jets need Zach Wilson to play well. And Zach Wilson now will not start the season as quarterback 1 and may not even get to play until October or early November at a worst case scenario. Now, with that being said, again, I don't think the Jets played a bad team game. The Jets did win their game, right? Zach Wilson didn't play great, right? Went 3 of 5 for 23 yards and 1 interception, as he before he ended up leaving the first quarter. So the quarterback play wasn't great, but being a second-year player with some new weapons, I do think it's kind of expected for there to be a little bit of a learning curve early. The play itself, although not super encouraging, isn't super discouraging. I've seen worse performances in the preseason by rookies and second-year quarterbacks. Sometimes you're just not having the best day on offense, right? It happens. It's versus the Philadelphia defense that is expected to be very good. The quarterback play by Zach Wilson wasn't phenomenal, but I don't think it's anything to be too concerned about, right? It's not a Deshaun Watson situation, but the injury is the big reason why they aren't winners from this week, right? Garrett Wilson, their top 10 pick, didn't play great, right? Caught 3 of his 5 targets for 20, Garrett Wilson did not play great. He had 2 receptions on 3 targets for 25 yards. Didn't have a bad day by any means, right? Kind of had a typical rookie wide receiver that didn't play the entire game worth of snaps, but I thought that his performance could have been a little bit better. And then Bryce Hall, the early second-round pick and the supposed best running back from this class, did have 5 carries for 15 yards, only averaging 3 yards per carry. The rookie class was not bad. Their team performance was not a bad one, but just overall, with the injury happening, with none of their players, none of their rookies really breaking out and having star performances early, I do think that they were one of the lesser impressive teams from this week. Not that they were a bad football team, and I wouldn't even consider them a real loser as far as the play that was put on the field, but I do think that the injury to Zach Wilson, I do think that the starting quarterback going down in the preseason, as well as not having any real breakout stars from your rookie class, either offensively or defensively, is a little bit concerning to me as a viewer of the New York Jets. Now, getting on to some of these standout rookies, right? We talked about some of the rookies in the winners and losers category, but there were a couple other rookies that we didn't get to talk about quite yet that I did want to touch on. Players that were either drafted in the first round or just players in general that kind of had some big games, climbed some depth charts, made some big plays in the preseason, and are making a case for some starting time. Jordan Davis, the interior defensive lineman from Georgia, is one of those players. He had a very good debut with the Philadelphia Eagles, was doubled and triple teamed at times by the New York Jets starting offensive line, and he was extremely disruptive. I believe only played 9 plays as the interior defensive lineman for Philadelphia, but in those 3 plays, he was extremely productive, and again, on his first couple of plays, drew double and triple teams from the New York Jets offensive line. Now, Brian Robinson, the 4th-round running back from Alabama, did climb some depth chart rankings this week, as after a goal line fumble by starting running back Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson was put in as the team's primary running back and got 6 carries for 26 yards, not a bad showing by any means, and did score his first NFL career touchdown. He didn't have the biggest breakout game, didn't have like 100 yards rushing, didn't have, some huge breakaway run, but did climb the depth chart, did get some more carries earlier than a lot of people were expecting, and I think is going to be a pretty prominent role in the Washington Commanders backfield. Now, Malik Willis, what's the best way to put this? Malik Willis, the storyline of a quarterback, did make his NFL debut as well. Malik Willis, projected to go in the 1st round, fell all the way to the 3rd round. He was projected to go as high as 2, or in real life's case, as low as the middle of the 3rd round to the Tennessee Titans. However, the quarterback from Liberty did end up starting this preseason as the Titans starting quarterback, and although he wasn't, incredible, right, he did have some missed throws, he did have some missed opportunities, he did rely more on his legs than on his arm. Even he himself in his post-game interview admitted that he relied a little bit too much on his legs and relied a little bit too much on his athleticism and needs to learn how to use his arm a little better. Malik Willis still made some truly incredible plays. He had a really nice deep ball late in the first quarter that set the Titans up down in the red zone or in deep into the Baltimore Ravens territory. He had a really good touchdown run versus the Baltimore Ravens starting defense, where again, he just kind of took the snap, got to his first read, it wasn't there, so Malik Willis said, he's going to go out athlete everybody like he did in college, and he broke a few tackles, cut inside, and did score his first career rushing touchdown as a Tennessee Titan. I don't think that it was an all-around top-tier NFL performance. It wasn't the greatest rookie performance in the NFL, But I do think that Malik Willis showed the ceiling that he has. I do think Malik Willis showed the big play potential, showed how much he can truly open up the playbook for the Tennessee Titans. And if the Titans can develop Malik Willis, he has a big arm. He's extremely athletic. He is a smart quarterback that wants to learn. He is somebody that can turn into a top quarterback in the NFL. And I think that he showed the reason that he was a top draft pick, or a reason that he was projected to be a top draft pick in this year's class. Now, Sam Howell is another quarterback that impressed, the 5th-round pick from North Carolina. He came in for the Washington Commanders in relief of Carson Wentz and threw 9 completions of his 16 attempts, throwing for 145 yards. And despite not having a touchdown pass through the air, he did score 2 rushing touchdowns on the ground. Sam Howell's legs are not something that was necessarily a strength in his pre-draft process, right? It was something that it was like he can run, but you're not going to want to run him like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray every single game. Sam Howell showed that he can make some plays, showed that he can improvise when plays break down. Didn't have the greatest completion percentage, but did throw for 145 and did score 2 touchdowns on the ground. He had a very good game and was a big reason why the Washington Commanders were in a situation to win the game on the last drive. All their defense needed to do was hold the Carolina Panthers to nothing. The defense couldn't do that, but that does not take away from the fact that Sam Howell had a very good day in his NFL debut for the Commanders. And then the last player I want to talk about is first-round selection George Karlaftis. George Karlaftis was a late first-round pick made by the Kansas City Chiefs at the end of the first round this year, and a lot of people were conflicted about George Karlaftis. I was one person that wasn't a huge fan of Karlaftis just because he doesn't really have the experience or the numbers that you would expect from a first-round pick, but he did come in and did get his first career sack in his NFL debut versus the Chicago Bears. He looked pretty good, looked very disruptive, was disruptive on multiple defensive snaps for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I don't know if he's going to be a full-time edge rusher. I don't know if he's going to be a rotational guy to start. I'm not exactly sure the role that they plan to use him in the regular season, but George Karlaftis did look good. He showed some good hand usage, showed a very high motor, and as I said, did come away with his first career NFL sack on Justin Fields. But with all that being said, that is week 1 of the preseason, right? And of course, that wasn't every rookie that had a standout performance. That wasn't every rookie or every player that played good or bad in the preseason. There were a lot more takeaways, a lot more players, and a lot more big takeaways from week 1. But if I were to talk about every single rookie, we wouldn't end this podcast until week 2 was over. And, we don't necessarily have time to talk about everybody. But those were kind of the standout rookies. Those were the winners and losers and scores from around the NFL. And with that being said, that is all we have time for today. Thank you all so very much for watching the podcast. We'll be back next week with week 2 takeaways, with more rookie standouts, more big plays, more scores from around the league, and of course, more major updates. But with all that being said, that is all we have time for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast, and we will see y'all next week for preseason week number 2. Bye, guys.